read, honorable members of City Council, in accordance with Virginia Beach City Code 2-21 and 3 undersigned members of the City Council of Virginia Beach hereby call a special meeting of the Virginia Beach City Council. Excuse me. Wednesday, February 1st, 2023, 4:30, City Council Conference Room, Building 1, City Hall, second floor, room 2034, 2401 Courthouse Drive. Special purpose of the meeting is to discuss House Bill 1528, and requested by Jennifer Rouse, Chris Taylor, Sabrina Wooten. Thank you all for being here. Okay, Mr. Dehaney.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, Andrew Damon, Legislative Affairs Analyst, will give a presentation in response to the 3 questions that we were asked by the requesting council members.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mayor, members of council. I have a brief set of slides to you today for your discussion. So with that said, I'll just jump right into it. The information requested today was 3 parts. 1, adoption into the council legislative agenda or legislative packet, how it got picked up to move forward in the current General Assembly session, and the current status of the bill. Last year, former Councilmember Moss was the council sponsor of the proposed charter change, and it was included in the proposed legislative agenda, which was presented to council. Council discussed this measure as a part of the proposed legislative agenda at its meetings on September 13 and October 25. The legislative agenda was formally adopted by council at its November 15 meeting. A majority of these items were adopted unanimously, and 3 were removed from the block to be voted on individually. The proposed charter change was one of the items to be pulled from the block. I apologize for the typo there. And the vote was 6-5 in favor to adopt. On November 4, an invitation was sent to the members of the beach delegation to come to City Hall to meet with the mayor, the vice mayor, and city leadership on November 22. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss which of the city's legislative agenda items were to be patroned by members of the delegation. Patrons were secured for all but 3 items. The first was the council vacancies to be filled by a special election. The second was the taxation request for vaping and cannabis products. And the third was the prohibition on leaving vehicles running and unattended. A brief sidebar about the short session of the General Assembly right now is that they have 46 days. And what sets the 46-day apart from the 60-day in the even-numbered years is that both bodies further restrict members to introduce pieces of legislation because they just have 2 weeks less time to consider legislation. The reasons given at the November 22 meeting for declining to patron the following items: discussion about the council vacancies measure was that since it was not unanimous from council, there was no desire to introduce it as legislation. For the taxation on vaping and cannabis products, it was likely that this kind of measure would be taken up in other pieces of legislation. Therefore, they would likely be rolled into those measures as well. And the third, for the prohibition on leaving vehicles unattended, was in discussion. It was believed that it was just not a viable piece of legislation to pass. After this meeting, as is customary, Legislative Affairs began working with the patrons of the delegation and their staff, as well as Division of Legislative Services, to review drafts, provide additional background, and sign off prior to each patron filing their bill. It was during this time that no member of the beach delegation contacted city staff to communicate interest in introducing the proposed charter amendment, which is now known as House Bill 1528. House Bill 1528 was reported out of subcommittee from the House Committee on County, Cities, and Towns, otherwise known as CC&T, to the full CC&T committee by a vote of 9-0. The full CC&T committee is next scheduled to meet this coming Friday, February 3. Staff intends to fully support this bill unless directed otherwise by council. And lastly, there is a Senate companion piece of legislation in the form of Senate Bill 1524, patroned by now Senator Aaron Rouse, that recently passed unanimously by a vote of 15-0 on January 30th from the Senate Committee on Local Government. And likewise, staff supported this in line with the council legislative agenda. And that completes my slides.
Okay, any discussion or questions? Yeah, Jennifer.
I know this is very last minute, so I appreciate everyone who made an effort and made time to be here for this discussion. I want to give some background on the request and the reason for requesting the special session. So from the email I sent, I'm writing this email to request the call for a special session to discuss HB 1528. The request comes also from Councilwoman Sabrina Wooten and Councilman Chris Taylor. And this is based on emailed correspondence. The majority of council passed this and it was included in our legislative agenda. However, the vote on this bill has been delayed to next Friday, and there seems to be ambiguity as to why this has happened and on how to move forward. And so the request was to have a moment to discuss because there seemed to be a lot of confusion around the bill with no opportunity for the body to meet because it was a fifth Tuesday. So we didn't have another meeting before this bill came forward. So the request is to get clarity on what happened, clarity on the confusion, and an opportunity to discuss as a body.
Any other questions about what we've had so far? Okay, Sabrina?
I have a question about the presentation under number 2, where it says pretty much how it got picked up to move forward in this session. And then on the first point, on November 4th, an invitation was sent to Virginia Beach delegation to meet with the mayor, vice mayor, and city leadership on November 22nd. Who was involved in city leadership?
From my recollection, it was Patrick.
Mayor, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So there was a mayor, vice mayor, and then from city leadership, I think it was myself and Deborah and Andrew. Anybody else?
Deputy City Managers Chandler, Adams, and Assistant City Manager Chaparro.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure, because when I looked at city leadership, I thought that was inclusive of the body of city council, so it was not inclusive of city council members, correct?
It was just the mayor and the vice mayor. This is something that is a customary tradition that Virginia Beach has had from my understanding, several years. It was something that preceded myself and the mayor and the vice mayor, that after council adopted this legislative package, the mayor and the vice mayor would traditionally meet with the delegation to talk about council's package. The mayor and the vice mayor did mention this to council at the day that it was adopted in this session, in the meeting as well.
I don't recall that. I think I would particularly remember recalling that a decision was made by the delegation that they discussed, since the item was not unanimous from council, that it was not desired to introduce as legislation. I don't recall that at all. Perhaps I missed something, but I don't recall that.
Councilmember, that was a discussion that was had by the members of the delegation that attended that meeting. They talked about the items that they would consider taking on, and this is what they said about those three specific items.
Was there a summary of that information provided to city council?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, Chris.
Learning now that that is a customary tradition, is the body or vice mayor, mayor open to possibly moving forward, at least possibly having some representation from city council in that meeting, or is that just something you want to?
Yes, Mark.
The reason that it has historically been that way is because there is of course, the FOIA requirement that we've always talked about with you, that any time there's more than 2 council members present, it is a public meeting and the public is entitled to attend. The General Assembly members don't have that same limitation under FOIA. And so in the past, when it has been suggested that more than just the mayor and the vice mayor or 2 members of the council attend, the delegation has indicated a preference that only 2 be present. And that's how that developed.
Just in context to this discussion, the public, they may want to have knowledge of that meeting because, especially for this piece, that there was a public input and it was supported by the majority, even though it wasn't unanimous. I don't think the public had an opportunity to know or to understand that the local delegation was not going to carry. And that is an important piece.
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, that's what that was the members who were present at that meeting said it to us. Not all the members of our delegation attended that as well. So it wasn't fully inclusive of our entire delegation. The members that attended that meeting, that's what they expressed. Obviously, what we know now is that there is a member of the delegation who decided to bring it forward, and also a former council member who is now a part of the delegation who brought it forward as well.
And Chris, just a point of clarification, so we just don't think we were trying to do things through the back door. Before I became mayor, when I was sitting in Sabrina's seat, we used to meet formally with the delegation and the school board at a big meeting. And, there were a couple members of the delegation requested that, we not do that with the full bodies right now because, the stuff, to be talking about, it didn't come from us. Okay. But what I have been proposing and what I would like to do is to build the bridges with our delegation and our school board together. And on a periodic basis, get together and have like even a formal or informal, get together where we just can even mingle and talk to each other and get to know each other and then speak about, various things. But I think Mark described accurately, the reasons why it was done the way we do. And, from what I understand, and sometimes, we can come up with legislative packages, but the challenge is to find sponsors for it. And, that becomes part of the problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to know, you mentioned about a delegation that was there. Are you?
Sorry.
Are you allowed to say who all were present for that delegation? To see whether we had, from all sides or what? Because I don't know. Or is that not privy information?
I don't think that's. I don't have a problem saying who all was present. I think the only delegation member who was not able to attend because they had a conflict was Delegate Fowler. Is there anybody else who was not able to attend?
Delegate Anderson.
Everyone else
Everybody
except
else.
Delegate Fowler was present.
Delegate Fowler let us know that she had a conflict and she was not able to attend.
Thank you.
And so who were the other members?
Everybody else from the delegation was present, with the exception of Delegate Fowler. She indicated that she had a conflict and she was not able to attend.
Okay, I was asking for, I know you mentioned Delegate Fowler, but what other members by name?
Anybody else?
Do you know the name of our delegation?
Members present.
Yeah, the present.
It was delegates Knight, Bloxham, Davis, Greenhall, and Senators Cosgrove and D-Stuff. I don't remember Senator Lewis in attendance, or Senator Kiggins had just been elected to Congress, so she wasn't going to attend.
And that last name, I'm sorry. what was-
Kiggins.
And the one before that one?
Lewis.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So Delegate Fowler wasn't present at the initial delegation meeting with the mayor, vice mayor, and city leadership. She since picked up the bill and put it forward for this General Assembly. And that's what we know as HB 1528. And so the confusion and the reason for this discussion is we received emails as a body that that bill was scheduled to move forward, and then it was pulled without explanation. And so she was seeking explanation. And then a lot of stakeholders, we got a lot of input that made things very confusing. So I would like clarity on what happened between Delegate Fowler putting the bill forward and the bill coming off, and where the confusion is.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I'm going to defer to Andrew. I don't know if we can speak to that, but Andrew, do you know why the delegation pulled that?
I have no idea. No one's been communicating with me about it. I know Subcommittee Chairman McNamara had mentioned people were contacted, but I don't know what that means. I'm also not in Richmond, so.
Maybe I'll
Yes, please.
I'll provide some context, guys. I think there's some confusion. So I had the opportunity to speak with Delegate McNamara. I reached out and he called me back. And he's quoted, he says, the vote went 9-0. And then they began receiving some calls. And secondly, he's quoted as saying he believes at this time it may not be the will of the current council or the city council to move forward. And so I have kind of some background, but that's his quote. And then in speaking with is it Miss Bryan or Mrs.? Mrs. Bryan on Friday via the telephone, she also provided some context to kind of what happened between Friday the 20th and the vote, or to table it. And so I kind of want to walk through, if there's no other questions, because that seems to be the main
Yeah,
question.
go right ahead, Chris.
Okay. So the reason I signed on to sponsor this special session was because I had a constituent reach out, and multiple constituents reach out and email. And so I'll start with kind of point A, which is, we just reviewed our citizen survey during our retreat. And the top overall priority that we learned was residents wanted opportunities for residents to participate in city policy, development, and decision-making. And then from there, we heard from our residents about our customer service and the community engagement. And the two key pieces were opportunities for resident participation in city policy and development and decision-making. And that was 32.9%, which was the lowest percentage out of the 5 issues. And so it's about building trust with the community. And then when it came to the importance and the satisfaction analysis of the customer service and community engagement priorities, we ranked very high priority the opportunity for resident participation, 42.6% important. And so I want to read to you the email that I think is going to provide context to your question, Jen. But this is from Rick Boyles, and he's writing to the senators after learning this past subcommittee, and now it's tabled. Good morning, senators. I would ask for your support. These are some of the same senators that chose not to carry it. Of Virginia, HB 1528, which modifies the City of Virginia Beach Charter to require special elections of vacant seats for the position of council and mayor, continuing to allow appointment of persons by the city to fulfill these positions when they are vacant is an affront to the tax-paying citizens of the city and invites cronyism into the election process. It has come to my attention that the Virginia Beach Legislative Affairs Director has presented to the committee the following disingenuous statement that implies that the current city council might have a differing opinion on the bill. That's what they're talking about, the differing opinion. How did it come? Until such time as the current city council opines differently, which the voting public can then weigh on, the City of Virginia Beach City Council, acting as representatives for the voting taxpayers of the city, asked for this bill, and it should have your continuing support. Thank you. And so that was a resident that reached out to me and had questions. And so, as we know, the city council is a continuous body. There was a legislative agenda set. I was shocked when I heard Delegate McNamara's comments and read Mrs. Bryant's message and written comment because we hadn't discussed it, which is okay. I wasn't even aware of the bill. But there was public input for the charter change, and it was advertised public hearing on November 9th, 2021 and November 1st, 2022. The council on 11/15 took a position, 6-5 in favor of changing the process to fill the vacancy, which we learned was sponsored by Mr. Moss. But the current city council has not discussed this bill or voted to modify the policy. And here's the challenge is we've had the opportunity. We were just in our retreat and we agreed to be transparent and communicate, to be bold with one another. On the 25th, we were presented with a legislative agenda update, and it was under city charter amendment. So we all saw this, we received it. No one brought it up that it was an issue. There was no mention of HB 1528 by any council member or the city manager at our retreat. And that Friday was the day it passed subcommittee. And then there was actually an agenda item on our retreat to talk about the legislative agenda process. And again, no mention. So I was taken back when I learned that there was now a delegate, McNamara, stating that the concern was they were receiving phone calls and there was some doubt that the current city council still supported this when we hadn't discussed it and been together for 2 full days. Fast forward to HB 1524, the conversation, the process. I think it is important for the public that really desires more input and to be a part of our policy is Mrs. Bryan reports to the city manager, is that correct? Yes. Not the electoral board or members of the General Assembly, nor any other individual on city council. Members do retain the right to communicate their dissent from a position taken by the body. But on January 20th, Deborah Bryan nor her staff provided written testimony or even attended the subcommittee meeting. It's an email. I have an email here where she indicates that she did not.
From my clarification, my understanding, Deborah or our state lobbyists attended on the city's behalf, but the subcommittee did not take testimony, so they were not able to provide any testimony.
Okay, I'll share that email with the body. I asked her specifically, and she said she did not attend the meeting, but nonetheless, the question was, did anyone attend? And she wrote on January 30th to me, and she copied you, Mr. Duhaney. No, following this email and after discussion with our state lobbying consultants, we decided that the better course would be to have a member of the lobbying firm on hand in case there were any questions from the subcommittee and or need for testimony. There being no questions, testimony was unnecessary, and the bill was supported by unanimous vote. So she's saying no, she did not.
But the city's lobbying firm attended on the city's behalf.
Okay. And so on Thursday, fast forward, hours before the full committee meets, it's been voted 9-0. Debbie Bryant submits written request comments under the bill. And many of you have seen her comments at 9:37 p.m., hours before it's going before. And she says, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, in the spirit of full transparency, the city council vote for Virginia Beach Charter Change HB 1528 was not unanimous. The previous city council voted 6-5 to include this item in its legislative agenda. The newly elected, now seated council has 5 new members and has not weighed in on this charter change. Thank you, Deborah and Brian. And I think that's where the snowball, and we started getting contact because this is after our retreat. and we received a presentation. And the delegation that we just learned, they all knew there was not a unanimous vote because we just learned that in the meeting with the mayor, the vice mayor, and city leadership, no one decided to patron it. And so I was concerned with why this position and this message was stated. And it's funny because under this comment was actually a constituent that said, please move forward with this. The city council has decided and determined that's the direction. And so Debbie Bryan sent this message without communicating with the city council and without authorization from the city manager. And some may say she doesn't need authorization.
Okay, Patrick,
Go ahead.
if we can.
After
Okay, go right ahead, Chris. Go ahead and finish.
And so I sent her an email and I asked her, did you receive direction from the city council as a body or city manager Duhaney before providing the written request comments for HB 1528, January 26th at 9:37? And her response was no. The specific communication was in response to the question I received from various members of the General Assembly, which she does not take direction from. Since the answer to the question was a matter of public record and readily available on the city's website, I provided the information without requesting the authorization of the city manager or the city council. That's important because we didn't have a chance to vet the message. It was unnecessary to write the message because she says it's a matter of public record and readily available. Subcommittee didn't seek that information. And so I wanted to go, did you have some, Patrick?
From my conversation with Deborah, members of the delegation and the subcommittee asked her those specific questions. And Deborah submitted those comments in response to the questions that they asked her.
And I had that here. I would, why didn't at that point, and maybe this is, I'm learning there's some norms, but why didn't Deborah communicate the questions to city council or come back and say, hey, this is an issue, there's some concern. Do you all agree that we should continue moving forward? And so council nor the city manager had an opportunity to vet the contents of her message. And to some, it was confusing. To my constituent, he says it was disingenuous. I don't necessarily want to go that far. So why didn't Mrs. Bryan communicate those questions she was receiving from the General Assembly members to City Council or the city manager? So that kind of gets us to the confusion, the message. I have some other comments, but I've been talking for a few minutes. So that should give you kind of a context of what led to the confusion, why this bill is now tabled, and why our inboxes are getting filled, and the public, to a degree, is upset. Go ahead, Rocky.
Okay, Rocky, you've been in the House of Delegates. Can you shed some light on this?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the gentleman keeps saying it was tabled. It wasn't tabled. It was passed by for the day, which means that it'll come back up. Tabled means that it's dead forever, ever, amen. But it wasn't tabled. It was passed by for the day. Just a point of clarification.
Well, I'll go on record. Delegate McNamara in our conversations indicated it's done. Now that could change, and that was in a conversation with him, and he explained why it's done. But that's why I'm saying table, because he's indicated that's where it's going.
Yeah, but that may be where it's going, but it's not there now. It's still breathing life in it right now. It's just passed by for the day, so it will come back up on the next CC&T meeting.
Patrick.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, to clarify, it's actually coming back up on Friday, February 3rd. And just as Deborah fully supported the Senate Bill 1524, that's accompanied the 1528 for the House bill, she's going to do the same thing unless council gives us direction to change course. Deborah did attend the meeting, or our state lobbyist on our behalf did, to make testimony in support. The subcommittee just did not take testimony at that time. I spoke to Deborah about that. She answered the questions as they asked her. I did clarify to her that going forward, she could answer that in a more clear way as well, to probably start off by saying the city supports and then go right into answering the delegation's answer. But she did not mean this to be a nefarious response. She was answering the legitimate, direct questions that she got from members of the delegation and the subcommittee.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I appreciate that clarification, Mr. Duhaney, because I think we should be very careful about impugning the integrity and the commitment that Ms. Bryan has made on behalf of our city council and the residents of the city of Virginia Beach. And I think we're precariously close to doing so. The other thing that I want to share with you is the city council, and I was one of the 6 members who voted in favor of holding special elections, and I continue to hold that belief strongly. It is preferable to appointments in every instance, and I hope that we can find a way to make sure that our voters in Virginia Beach are enfranchised at every opportunity. However, we have to make sure that it's operationally practical. And what I'm hearing is, first of all, the legislative agenda indicated our support, and that's what I voted for special elections to fill a city council vacancy. It did not indicate support for Bill 1528. And that's an important distinction that I think has become lost in this conversation. What city council voted for, that I voted for, was that we hold special elections when city council vacancies occur. I think the operational and how that works operationally has yet to be determined. And I think this council responsibly could only support a path forward or legislation that was operationally workable according to the election officials within the city of Virginia Beach. And to me, that's unclear. Now, I realize that I came in a few minutes late, and I apologize for my tardiness because I was coming from my office. But has that issue been addressed as a part of this conversation? Because I know we have members of the Electoral Board here, and I think if we're seeking direction, which I think is the more productive path forward here, what we do moving forward, it's important as we're considering these other elements of the discussion to just make sure that we're identifying a path forward and what's the purpose of this meeting. And I think the purpose of this meeting, as I understand it, is to seek clarity moving forward. So I think it would be useful to think about what's the next step and what does this council support? Because while I understand the perceived lack of clarity in the response that Ms. Bryan provided, it's certainly now that we have more context about the questions answered, nothing that she said in that statement was factually inaccurate. It was all accurate. And particularly in light of the fact that those direct questions were asked, I think it's a fair representation of the facts, not intentionally misleading of the legislators. So I think what the question here before us is, what do we do moving forward? And does the council support HB 1528? That is a conversation we've never had. And in the spirit of transparency, which I know is a topic of this conversation, I'd like to ask the question to either Mr. Damon or to Mr. Duhaney. Was the city made aware of this legislation? And when were we made aware of it and given the opportunity to support?
From what I recall, I was made aware of it in discovery of checking.
What does that mean for those of us who aren't familiar with the General Assembly operation?
So there is a website, lis.virginia.gov, that posts all of the bills and resolutions for every General Assembly session. And we go through and check periodically in the lead up to the beginning of the legislative session, how many bills have been posted. And so we just discovered that in the process of, that's just called discovery.
Well, that's interesting, because the legislator who dropped the bill that relates to our legislative agenda never informed the city or the representatives of the city in the General Assembly that this bill was coming forward or being introduced? Discovered it?
No, sir. Yeah, we just discovered it.
Did the Electoral Board or anyone else have an opportunity to review the wording of the legislation to determine if it's legal or possible?
Okay, Mark.
In fairness, the language that's employed in the bill is the language that's set forth in the agenda item. So it is consistent with the request that was made. So
There's still no communication about the introduction of the legislation or request for support.
That's fair.
that's fair.
Or and I think the council should take responsibility for our part, and I apologize to the election officials who are here, that we didn't take the time to ask for their review about whether or not, if I'm wrong about that, let me know, about whether or not it's possible. And I want to emphasize all of this in the context of I fully support having special elections, 100%. And we should be, in my opinion, working toward that goal, but it has to work. And also we have to work together in order to achieve that goal. And what I'm hearing is that it appears there have been a number of mistakes made across the board from a variety of participants in this discussion, including the council, including possibly the legislator and staff. None of it I'm aware of is nefarious or undermining the will of the people or the body, and I think we should be very careful about approaching that technique. But I really want to get to the heart of the matter, which is what the bill is asking even possible?
No, okay. Okay, wait, hang on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just for full transparency, Mark and I, once we saw that, we went back and we tried to figure out what happened, because normally we do try to get input on this before it gets before you. And from the best of our knowledge, what we could find is that when this was first considered by council, and you remember this is the second time this came around, council. Remember in 2021, Councilmember Rouse presented the same exact language to council for adoption in the legislative package, and council at that time decided not to include it. It was basically a carbon copy of that came into 2022. In 2021, we were able to identify that we did communicate with the then new electoral registrar, new voter registrar, the then voter registrar, that language, and asked them to provide us any feedback or input on it or concerns that they had. And what the response that they gave back was the budgetary impacts that was provided to council.
But not the, pardon me, but not the operational aspect.
Right, not any
When did you
concerns.
receive that
That
information?
was in 2021.
That was in 2021.
Yep.
So we were operating as an organization under the same premise that those principles, those concerns elevated by the election officials were the same. And when do we learn that there may be some operational impracticalities around the implementation of the intent of the legislation?
I think last week sometime, the new current voter registrar emailed Andrew, and then Andrew sent it to Deborah, and then Deborah contacted me and let me know, and then Deborah sent the email to the voter registrar, and I think copied myself and also members of the electoral board saying, please, as soon as you possibly can, because this is in council's adopted legislative package, so I'm going to have to advocate and support for it unless council tells me otherwise. If you have any concerns to the contrary, please have your electoral board or yourself send an email to the council as soon as possible, copying the city manager. And that was last week, Friday, I think, when the voter registrar copied the council, myself, and her board about her concerns that she found.
And I just couldn't imagine, and this would be my final remark for the time being, Mr. Mayor, I just couldn't imagine this council would want to support something, legislation, that wasn't possible, in spite of the fact that many of us share the goal of having a special election. I think that's really the heart of the matter, and I think we need to work through that, and hopefully we can do that here today.
Okay, yeah, Patrick.
And I would like to say, Mr. Blues, you're right. I think in looking at it now, there are some things in there that we need to vet, and council probably needs to give us guidance on that in light of what has been revealed, so that we can get it to Deborah, so Deborah can send to the office of Senator Rouse and to the office of Delegate Converse Fowler, any possible updates that they need to meet while they go through the process for the committee and also for crossover, should council wants us to continue to support this.
Yep. Jennifer, do you have your hand up? And
Yes.
then Chris, and then Sabrina.
Thank you, Mayor. So is anything in the bill legally unworkable?
Well, those are two separate things. It is legal. An election can take place the week following a primary election. An election cannot take place in the 55-day period preceding a general or primary election. But it can take place after. The problem is not, is it illegal under existing Virginia law? The question that we've now, or the problem that we've now been made aware of is there is another law that says that the election equipment used in that primary election must be locked up and is unavailable for use in the subsequent election until any recount has, the period for a recount has passed, which is, I think, 30 days, and longer if a recount has to take place. So you have a resource issue, both probably in terms of not only machines, but also in terms of people available to do it. And I would defer to the electoral board or the registrar to talk to you about that more in detail. But it's not illegal, but I can understand, based upon the information that has been provided now, why they consider it difficult or unworkable.
Okay, Chris, and then Sabrina, and then if it's okay, after the two speak, and then we can get the folks from the electoral board up. Would that be okay?
And I want to say thank you to Councilmember Lucci for giving us kind of a line to stay behind, but I do think with transparency, asking questions doesn't necessarily indicate it's nefarious. But Mr. Damon, for the taxation on vaping and cannabis products leaving vehicles unattended, are both those tabled now, or have they asked any subcommittees?
No, there was no patron to introduce them, so they were never introduced to be from the delegate. There could have been another member of the Senate or the House to introduce a similar measure, but no one from the delegation.
And to Councilmember Lucci's question, the last point I had here was, what is the perceived or real election board role in drafting legislation? Because I asked also Mrs. Bryan, I said, did Christine Lewis or anyone from the Virginia Beach Electoral Board contact you concerning this? If so, was this before or after the council retreat? She said yes. Ms. Lewis sent an email to Andrew on Friday, 10/24, which you forwarded to me. And I have that email. And so that was early on. So it's just very difficult as a new member of this body to understand how we could have a bill that hasn't been vetted. As Secretary Belote, he may be here, I've never seen him in person. Right over there. How you doing, sir? He emailed Senator Rouse and Delegate Fowler and said it was actually illegal. He did give me a definition today of where he found that term illegal, unworkable, and in Christine Lewis's email to us, she didn't say that. She just said that the electoral board is asking that the city share these concerns with the patron and to consider, again, the board's opposition to the bill because it doesn't consider the practicality of administering elections. And so I think we do have a challenge here, but I'm a little confused as to how we got to this point.
Okay, Sabrina?
So I just want to make sure, and this is just my perspective, just want to make sure we don't convolute the conversation. So part of the conversation in the very beginning is focus on communication. Communication with this body, communication with Mrs. Bryant, and when things have changed or things need to be communicated, those things should happen. And so I'm not clear as to whether that's going to be addressed, but we have an issue with communication there. When something like that happens in the General Assembly and we as a body have supported it, those are things we should know. It's not something you should find out on Facebook. It's not something you should find out from constituents who are saying, we have certain council members calling up to table or to stop an item from going forward. So while I understand about the legality of the legislation, and I do have a question about that, I do want to make sure we are clear and that going forward, we're not having the same issues with communication and about discussing issues of this nature and how that information should come to us as a body. Even the information that I talked about from the November 22nd meeting. That should have been a memo to the body letting us know where we were on that issue. That wasn't done. So going forward, first we need to fix the communication issue, because that's not something that we should be dealing with in the future. The other part, in terms of moving forward, I'm certainly all for that. But we definitely need to fix both of those issues. Now, it's my understanding, I saw an email that the legislation that Senator Rouse had passed, there's no issues with legality. That particular legislation is good to go. I saw an email. I thought it was from you, Mr. Duhaney. I saw that email that it had passed, and that we were fine in terms of legalities.
Councilmember Wooten, I did not opine on legality. What I was opining was a similar bill that's similar to 1528 is in the Senate, and Deborah Bryan was given the opportunity to testify, and she testified in support of it in line with council's legislative package. From what I know from Mark, there's still those similar issues that Mr. Rouse or Delegate Converse Fowler is not fully aware of yet, because this is just a prevailing issue that we're dealing with now, that if council gives us guidance, we'll need to communicate that to them. But Mark,
That's correct. The Senate bill is identical to the House bill now. And the email that I saw, what I understood it to be saying was, because it is what is consistent with what the council passed, the city staff would advocate for it, and they did.
And so, just for clarity, this is, either one of you can answer, maybe you, Attorney Styles. Is this unusual? Oftentimes when a legislative body passes or agrees that they want to pass legislation, in this instance is for the General Assembly, but is this instance, I guess, unique? Because oftentimes you'll have approval to pass a legislation, but then the staff and those involved, they are the ones who put together and make sure it's legal as it goes out, as the legislation rolls out and it's implemented. So if there is an issue or concern with legality, we get it straight before it's implemented. But the fact that the council has approved it, that shouldn't change. That's my understanding. So I just want to make sure, number one, that, our position, and to make sure the council knows our position on this legislation hasn't changed. We just need to make sure everything is in order to move forward. But is this unique in this occurrence coming up where you have legislation that passes and then staff has to work to make sure it's in line with what has been, I guess, approved? Make sure all the laws are in order.
The specific language that you approved to present in the legislative package was reviewed and drafted by my office, and we continue to believe and assert that it is in fact legal. We acknowledge now, however, based upon information recently provided to us by the Electoral Board and the registrar, that it creates difficulties in terms of available resources for them. If we rented or bought additional polling books and machines, we would not be violating the law to conduct a special election 7 days after a primary. But it does create, and they have identified that it creates, and I welcome them to come up and explain in their own words the problems that it creates. It creates practical difficulties that if they did not address, that could result in unlawful conduct. For example, if you tried to reuse those same machines, that would be a violation of law. But if you use different machines, it wouldn't be. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
and then just to clarify, Councilmember Wooten, to answer your question specifically, with these issues, impracticalities, all of that doesn't change our position on it. Council adopted it in your legislative package. So unless council tells staff otherwise, we're going to advocate in support of it, like Deborah did for 1524 and what she tried to do for 1528, but was not given the opportunity to testify for. So that's.
And just to, I know we've invited the electoral board up. We've received email communication from Delegate Fowler that she's willing to make whatever amendments necessary to make the bill workable and practical and operational. So we know that it's legal, but there's willingness in the General Assembly to make the bill also taking in the input from the board so that it can move forward and be implemented.
Okay, at this point, if we can hear from the electoral board or.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
wanted to mention that I have served on the electoral board as vice chair, and I know what they're talking about. So they're not, no matter what, they're not making something up or being influenced any other way. I did serve in that position.
Okay,
That's all I
thank you.
wanted to say.
Okay, Mr. Duhaney, can we invite the electoral board up now?
It's your floor, Mayor.
Okay, come on up. Okay. And that one was okay, welcome, and if you both can kindly address your names and your positions, please.
Certainly. I'm Dave Belote, the Secretary of the Virginia Beach Electoral Board.
I'm Christine Lewis, Director of Elections.
Okay, thank you.
So to start, emails sent by me, some in response to y'all, some around are at the core of this. So want to give you as much context as possible. Councilman Taylor and I have gone back and forth with, who said what to whom when. I want everyone to know on the electoral board, we are incredibly cognizant of FOIA and open meetings. And when we text or call with Christine, we're careful to have, space in between it all so that we are not meeting in contravention of law. And this all happened this week. I will say, I will very happily disagree with the city attorney because he had to twist himself into such pretzels to get to a version of legality. If you contemplate a citywide primary, as we had Congressional District 2 back in June, 108 precincts going, to then turn around and potentially have a special election for the mayor with 108 precincts, we can't double up on the equipment that we use, rental or buying. So to me, the intent is clear. You got to give enough space for a recount between elections. You cannot get anything done. So I stick by my own common man version of illegal, but I concede that attorneys can get to a point where you can say it works on the face of it. It just doesn't work for the human beings involved. So like Councilwoman Wooten, I first heard about this via Facebook. Was happily down with my wife at our beach house in Tavernier, Florida, Upper Keys, staying in touch. I, have my electoral board, vbgov.com email and keep in touch with what's going on so that I can answer questions. Christine will often recognize that there's something that needs either electoral board concurrence or just awareness, and she'll fire it by us. And how this all developed last Friday, about 8:58, according to my text, she says, hey, I'm updating the dress code for election officials. And she knew that I had been pushing to allow, tailored shorts and jeans in some cases. And so I said, absolutely. I said, and I just saw this on Facebook about doing a special election 7 days after doing a primary. Can we please reach out to council and ask them to reconsider? And she says, okay. And your text to me was at around 9:30. She then did the research, and she came back to us by telephone. My phone call came at 4:10 p.m. on Friday and said not only is it impossible to do 108 precincts 7 days apart while we are still canvassing and validating, we don't verify the results of an election until 7 days later. So as written, this thing was telling us while you are canvassing 108 precincts and certifying an election, you are then going to go back, put everything out in all the polling places and do it all over. So unworkable on the face of it. And I asked her via text, please ask counsel. She called back and said, not only is it so unworkable, we have to impound the machines. And she read to us or said, here's what I'm putting in my note to council. And I alone said, I approve. I'm certain that Jeff and Al did as well. And a little more context to get information to people. Jeff tends to deal with the Republicans and I tend to deal with the Democrats. And a number of you guys know that I've worked both Capitol Hill and Washington. I've done some work with various delegates. And I went back via email, again, available on the vbgov.com, and told my two fellow board members, I said, would you like me to forward Christine's email to the council, to Delegate Fowler and Senator Rouse, so that they know there's some significant problem with this legislation? And Al and Jeff both by email said, yes, please do. And so I crafted the email trying to get a message behind the scenes to the bill's proponent that it didn't work. And it was nobody else, who used the word illegal, because that's how I interpret it. Jeff, by the way, as an attorney, is incredibly careful never to rule on anything as an attorney in his role as the chair of the Electoral Board. We stay out of that. But I put in that email, this doesn't work. I use the words illegal, unworkable, and costly because just to do it would be about $500,000 to, and Christine has all of the words. And if you guys, and I also put in the same email, which I think many of you have seen because she then shared it with the entire council. I said, I share the goal, just as Councilman Berlucci has said. I think, as a matter of principle, that special elections are far better than appointments. I said, I share the goal. 108 precincts, 1,200 EOs is an incredibly intricate and complicated problem. Please call us and we'll find a way to fix it. Well, and I had hoped that she would have called back and said, how do we fix it? No, I saw it explode on Facebook the next morning. Then I saw her, courtesy copying all of y'all, telling me that I should stay in my lane and I had no right to do what citizens can do and communicate my concerns to, my elected officials. And so I just wrote her back a couple of questions. I said, okay, if we can't use our machines by law, how can we legally run? Doesn't anybody want to call us up and ask us how to run an election in the second largest voting locality in the state? So I stand by everything that I've said. Everybody can have every email that I wrote. And I concede that, yes, we can get to a point where it's legal, but almost impossible. If you want to ask how I would fix the problem, I'm happy to share, but that would be Dave and not the Electoral Board speaking. So let me stop there.
Okay, Jennifer, and then Chris, or Worth, I'm sorry.
Can you offer your advice on how we can?
And this is placed everywhere across the year to make sure that we can have workable and that fits everything else. I would say you always have the opportunity for Election Day in November. If you pick the third Tuesday in April, you are 5.5 months and 6.5 months away, so you have split the year in half. The third Tuesday in April is, I think, 9 weeks, so 63 days prior to the June primary. And so just having seen the process for, it takes a couple of months if you're going to do an appointment and put out questionnaires. So build that into the system. Say, depending on when the resignation or vacancy occurs, the special election will occur on either the third Tuesday of April or the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, which is always the general election.
Okay, Jennifer?
Lawsuit to repeal the Judge Jackson's decision for the 10-1 district system?
I believe Ms. Wooten, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was 2.1 million.
Because I'm hearing $500,000 is like a budgetary impact, and I think that a budgetary impact is something the city council can manage. And so I hear it, and I think it's something that, when it comes to voting, is not a deterrent for making sure that this works.
Okay, Sabrina, and then Worth.
And I know where we can find 384,000 of that money that we just want to spend on citizen input on a campaign on something we already know. So we can certainly redirect some of them funds to make sure we're in compliance with a bill that the majority of this body has approved and citizens want. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear. The interference for this bill is a key issue here. There was some interference from this bill moving forward. The information regarding the logistics of the bill was after the fact. We have to make sure we deal with the interference. It was clear there was interference. I don't know who. I'm not trying to, call names, but we don't need to interfere in that process. And so we certainly have learned that we can address the issues concerning the legislation, but the interference is a problem. That's what caught my attention, and we can't move forward as a body interfering in that manner.
Okay, Worth, and then Michael.
So is the $500,000 for an election citywide, or is that per district?
Per district,
Per district?
because we have to rent equipment.
For 40,000 households, 40,000 people,
It's not pretty.
10 precincts, 14 precincts, depending on.
10 precincts, you've got the,
It's about 18 precincts.
I had 10.
I had 14.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, they're not all equal. Yeah.
Okay, could we,
And then second,
folks in the gallery, please respect. Thank you.
is it illegal to use another city's voting machines?
no, but if we have just had a statewide primary, they've used theirs as well. I mean, just picture what happens on the third Thursday or third Tuesday in June. Every even year, it is probable that it's a congressional, citywide, district-wide primary, and everybody is going to be doing their own thing. And I would ask all of y'all to come out during canvassing and seeing everything that's happening in that week immediately afterwards. Councilwoman Rouse, while I can, I come from the Pentagon where, $300,000 is a rounding error. So yes, you can always find some additional money, but rather than just do something like, okay, well, let's do it 30 days or 45 days later, remember the human cost. It takes us 1,200 volunteer EOs that work a 14-hour day to run an election. If you were to say, okay, let's do it on July the 15th or August the 1st, you would essentially be telling the full-time election staff, don't bother with the summer because we are going to roll you right out of the primary, right into this, and you would only be gaining, for the $500,000, you'd only be gaining about 2 months worth of a newly elected person because you could just delay until November. So what we are talking about here, if you just try to change that window, is $500,000 for about 2 months worth of an elected official, which is why I would urge you to consider, let's set 2 times a year where if we are going to have a primary, and you'll always be in a range of 3 or 4 months until that seat is filled. So.
Okay, Worth, and then Michael.
I'm done.
Okay, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you to Mr. Belote and to Ms. Lewis for taking the time to be here. Mr. Belote, I hope you don't mind me sharing that you traveled. Well, I think you did share yourself that you traveled just to be here today, which I think is
I left my house in the Keys at 3:30 to drive to Miami Airport and flew through Reagan, got here at about 11.
Well, I think that's a really testament to the commitment, not only, and reflects the commitment that you and the members of the electoral board, both volunteer and professional staff, dedicate to your work and the seriousness with which you approach these discussions, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you.
I just want to take a moment, though, to go back to some comments that were made and some inferences that were discussed earlier about interference and about, I think part of the reason we're here is because there seems to be some allegations or assertions that there was something improper happened. And, you know, I am really, really frustrated with sitting at this table and on the dais and hearing descriptions about interference and improprieties without receipts. Nobody was named. No evidence was presented that identified anything improper occurring. And each and every member of this body has the, sorry, Mr. Mayor, if you could just make sure that there aren't any interruptions here, but each and every member of this body has an opportunity to express their opinion to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And let me go further to say, and I know it wasn't me because I support the legislation, but I don't want the public to think that any member of this body or that the body or staff is doing anything improper, because I haven't seen any evidence that demonstrates that. And time again, we sit around these tables and we hear those discussions occur, and it undermines public trust. I find it to be disrespectful to the public and intentionally misleading. And if something improper has occurred, bring it to light. Say the names. Tell us who did it. Show us the receipts. And then let's have a conversation about it. But until that time occurs, I don't really want to sit here, and I think it's very improper for the public to listen to these discussions and have these inferences made. And as a member of this body for more than 3 years, I've heard it happen a lot. And I think we need to be mindful about the impact that it has on our ability to collaborate as a body, as a community, to create solutions and do the work that people sent us here to do. And I hope that we move forward in that spirit.
Thank you, Sabrina, then Chris.
So, you know, as a council member, I hope that I can express, you know, the sentiments of citizens in this community without feeling like and comments being made that I'm not inferring or doing something. As a member of this body, that is one's perspective and should not, I don't think I should be felt to be, in so many words, referred to or disciplined as if I'm doing something wrong. I'm repeating what I saw and heard from citizens. Names. So the names that I saw: Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Rosemary Wilson, Barbara Henley, and Rocky Holcomb. Those were the names I saw. Now, that's the receipt I saw. Now, excuse me, I'm speaking. You asked for no interruptions. Please, sir. Thank you. So, whether it's true or not, I do not know. However, this is what's coming from the community. The community is saying phone calls are being made, and these are the folks who are interfering. And if they are not interfering, and their name has been put here, certainly, you know, address that, because it's out there, and the citizens believe that this is what's happening. That you, those mentioned here, have been interfering, and somehow, you know, made reference to stopping this from going forward. So, I mean, this is your opportunity to say, you know, I was not involved in that. But that is what I'm being told. Is it the letter of the law? I do not know. But you do have an opportunity to say yay or nay. Okay. I am addressing what the citizens have said to me. Thank you.
Chris, and then Barbara.
Mr. Bullock, Christine, thank you. We had a civil discussion, civil email. Thank you. I know you thought I was a staffer, though.
Well, when you sent me a note at 6 in the morning that said Chris, I said, okay. And then I realized my next door neighbor had his signs in her yard for 6 weeks, so I should have put it together.
But thank you for coming. I just wanted to comment on Councilman Berlucci's expression. I want to thank you for being so bold. I reached out to Patrick. I had a conversation with Deborah on Friday, 5:11 p.m. We talked for 18 minutes. And she was concerned with some of the things that had taken place. And I said, well, just send a note to council and let us know your position. And she said, I need to talk to Patrick. And I immediately reached out to Patrick. This is what Patrick said, and he can confirm. We can't just, call people out. And I said, I agree. And Michael, so the first thing I said here was, you have a right as an individual council member, just talk to anyone you want to. It's not any of our business. So I want to make it very clear, the intention of this meeting, you asked for receipts, was not to call any individual member out. But what we have learned is that it might be prudent to include the Electoral Board in bills or items that require their input, because here we are now with a serious challenge. But I do want Patrick to confirm that we had that discussion, but Deborah was willing to go on record and say, hey, this is who I've talked to, because Chairman McNamara says we're getting calls. He said that publicly. And now there's a doubt.
Okay, folks, address the chair. If you hold on, let's be respectful.
And now there's doubt that this is the will of City Council. How do you get to doubt when we just left retreat? It was on our agenda. No one brought it up. No one discussed it. Not nefarious, not illegal. No one's pointing fingers. And Patrick, you can confirm. I said, Deborah, just send the email. Just lay it out. And she said, I'm concerned about calling names. And Patrick said, that's not what we need to do. And I said, fine. I just wanted to address, this is not throwing shots. This is trying to deal with a serious issue. And our citizens told us that's their biggest priority and concern. They want to be heard. Thank you.
Okay, Barbara.
Well, it's pretty disturbing to have us sitting here responding to gossip. The last thing I had anything at all to do with this topic was the day that we took a vote on whether or not to approve it, and I was one who voted no. Since that time, I have had absolutely no mention of this piece of legislation to anybody that I know of, unless it was just as a general thing about our legislative package. Every one of you can pick up the phone and call any one of us if you have any questions. And rather than get us all in an embarrassing situation like this with our electoral board, I suggest that you do that if you have a question. I don't know who's circulating this, but I voted no because I felt that we had not vetted it. We had a public hearing, nobody came. When we did vote on it, we had just the usual couple of people who speak on everything. This was never discussed a lot with the public. We certainly didn't discuss it with the electoral board. We didn't discuss to find out how much it was going to cost. We didn't discuss it with the citizens. No, it wasn't discussed at the retreat because it's not been one of those issues that we've been really concerned about. It was just put on the legislative package of the potential by one council member. Just like everything else we had a chance to vote, I voted no because it had not been vetted either with the staff or with the public. And if that's interfering, that's interfering. But my vote was that particular date, and I've had absolutely no action on this since that date. And I really think that we've got to start talking to each other rather than getting ourselves in a situation like this, which is extremely embarrassing. In all of my years on the council, I've never seen anything like this before.
Okay.
Thank you.
At this point, if I could say this, and, I'm grateful that we had the conversation because this is how we move forward. And if you don't mind, I'm going to put on my hat now, not as a mayor, but as a guy that has taught government at a graduate level for a number of years. And I'll tell you what, it is not an uncommon thing that there are misconnections between elected bodies, whether it be state to local, from state to federal, from federal to local. Miscommunications like this are almost the way of the world. And, I will say this, understanding the process. And if you ever go to Richmond, it's fast and furious up there. This is one issue, and how many issues that are up there and all the votes that they're doing, things are moving fast and furious. And, I just want to speak up, for our legislative liaison up there. Understanding the role and function, yes, there is an accountability to this council and to the people of Virginia Beach. But the person serves also as a bridge to the General Assembly. So it's a matter of establishing credibility with us and the legislators up there. And one of the things is that I found in, dealing with delegations over time is nobody wants to be blindsided. Can you imagine not telling a delegate that was a legitimate inquiry coming from the Board of Elections? And the other thing is too, once we pass a request up, now you correct me if I'm wrong, it's up to the legislator or senator's office to mark up the bill, into a fashion that's votable. And but once again, there was some disconnects here. We're going to admit that, but once again, we're going to work toward the win-win on that. And I'm going to, state, that since I became mayor in 2018, this has been on the radar. Okay. And I would like the opportunity to explain why I was, voted nay on this one, if you don't mind. It was the practicality of the thing. And my concern, we hear about the public engagement and, part of my goal, okay, when we talk about inclusion, and you're 100% right, Chris, bringing people to the table and having, a tremendous amount of gaps that are out there where we have a vacant seat, that was a concern of mine. Because the time it would take. Now, Mark, I understand that we have a 60-day window that we have to make the replacement somehow.
If it would be helpful, I will recap, and with Dana here to correct me if I get it wrong, how this process works today. When there is a vacancy on this council, there are two conflicting provisions. There's the state law provision and the charter provision. The state law provides, is it 60? 45. The state law says that you have 45 days to fill the vacancy, and if you don't, and this is an interim appointment, it's not a permanent appointment, the council has to do two things. Within 15 days, the council has to request a special election to permanently fill the seat. And within 45 days, under the state law, you have to make an appointment for an interim person to fill the seat until that special election can take place. If you don't fill it within 45 days, then the judges of the circuit court can fill it for you. So, what you do is you have a process where you, within 60 days, which is what your charter says, your charter and the state law disagree. The charter gives you 60 days to fill a position. You have a process where you appoint someone for the interim position, and then the special election, which is subject to all the same rules that a special election under this provision would require. There are a myriad of rules. It can't be within 55 days of a general special election. A special election has to be on a Tuesday. If the special election would be within 120 days of the end of the vacancy's term, you don't have it at all. You just have a regular election. There are a bunch of rules. But the goal of this amendment, as we drafted it, was to shorten the window of that special election as short as possible so that you didn't have to have an interim appointment, right? Because you were always going to have a special election anyway, ultimately to fill it. This was to take the place of the interim appointment. And you have a law, the state law is out there that says you can't have an election, you can't have a special election within 55 days of a general election or primary. So we wrote it to say, if the vacancy would be filled within that 55-day period, it goes to the first available opportunity outside that period. I don't disagree with you, sir, when you say that's incredibly unworkable. I will accept that. I wish that we had identified that in 2021 when we asked your predecessor the question, but we didn't. I wish we had, but we didn't. We know it now, and we need to fix it. Now, Mr. Belote, if you're comfortable with what Mr. Belote proposes, we can write that. But remember, what that's going to do is you're going to have, depending on when that vacancy occurs, you're going to have 30, 60, 90, 120 days potentially where some district sits without a representative. And that, if that's okay with you, that's okay with you. I just want you to understand that's what the interim appointment was designed to prevent. And if you can only have it 2 days a year, that's where you may, I mean, that's the issue that you may have. But that is a decision that this body can make. I am aware that Delegate Fowler has proposed an amendment. The amendment just takes out the sentence that says, if it occurs within 55 days of an election, you have it on the following Tuesday. She just strikes that out. That really doesn't solve the problem for you because there's a standalone Virginia statute that says, as I told you, it can't be within 55 days of a primary, so we couldn't schedule the primary in that 55-day period. So by default, it would end up being, as soon as possible, immediately after the election, the primary. So we need to deal with this issue. We can work with your electoral board to try to do it, if that's the will of the body. But it is, I appreciate the distinction that the commissioner makes, but you can lawfully pass this, but it will create a cost and a both financial and human toll on the electoral staff. And so I would recommend that you do try to find a solution that would address the problem that they have now identified.
And if I could, just say, when I was blessed by the public to be elected mayor November 20th of 2018, it was an interesting baptism that I had. 3 of the elections that year, went to a recount. Then they found out the beach seat guy didn't live at the beach. So we appointed Guy Tower, who was subsequently reelected. Shannon Kane left to run for the House of Delegates, and we appointed Michael Berlucci, and he was reelected after that. And it was always my concern, it wasn't denying the public access, it was the amount of gap that a district would have without a representative. Even with the process that we had, it was taking some time to do. Now, I listened to some of the concerns about council members at the time about lack of public input. And Chris, you're spot on. So the process used to be that, Amanda would put out a call for people to submit their resumes in, to step forward, and then we would evaluate those, and then we would come up with people to interview, and we would interview candidates. But the additional step that I recommended putting in, that the council agreed to, we would then expand it another week and have public input on it. Granted, it was a compromise. Granted, it's not a thing, but the logistics and practicality of which way to go with this was complex. And believe me when I say, my intent was never to deny the public a voice in the opinion in the way we were doing things. But once again, my entire thing was the complexity that was going to go on, and I wasn't even aware. And forgive me, we should have consulted the Board of Elections on this if we're going to be talking about elections. And so, but once again, it's a type of thing is, and the other compounding factor too is this is that charter change. And when we met with the delegation, and they told us, several of them, they brought it up, not us, okay? That the fact that it wasn't a unanimous vote, and that's a requisite in some elected local bodies, something that goes forward, okay? That they were reluctant at that time to bring it forward. Now, in terms of my involvement, was happened not only with myself and other council members in the past. We have not only the right, but the obligation that, sometimes things don't go our way locally, but, we have a right as individual voters. But the one thing people knew where I stood publicly on this, quite frankly, for a number of years. And it wasn't to short circuit the voter at all. It was to do the best process at the time, to get somebody in to fill a vacancy, and then that the next regularly scheduled election, when you can predict a higher turnout, versus some special elections, it might have been a better way to do it. But that being said now, we have a challenge in front of us, which we didn't have prior to. We now have district voting. Okay. But once again, I think now that hopefully with this meeting, we understand a little bit of both sides of the argument, that we may be able to go forward. But once again, this is a charter change, and it's going to require a super majority, on both the houses and everything. So, the thing is, it has been a complex issue. And if there were a simpler solution, we would have took it a while ago. But I think what we should agree is that we understand where we're coming from. And then, we got to, bring certain people to the table. But the thing is, this has been the thing. I stood a number of years ago, governor appointed me to be on his panel for unfunded mandates. And a lot of times, the delegation in Richmond would pass a bunch of laws that we would have to wind up paying for. But the thing is, right now, this is in the court, in the bailiwick of the House of Delegates and the Senate. And, for whatever reasons, there's, sometimes not the perfect harmony up there either. And is especially true in Washington these days. But right now, this is under the purview of, what's going on. And the thing is, from our point of view, could we all agree we could do better? And I think we should. But right now, this is, kind of a time. I was unaware that this was even moving forward until recently. And, so, that's why I just wanted to get my 2 cents in. Okay, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to everybody for coming out today. I've just kind of been sitting here taking all of it in, and I couldn't agree more strongly with what Councilwoman Henley said about, and Councilwoman Wooten said for that matter as well, about the need for communication among the body. And, communication not just in the form of emails, but doing it the old-fashioned way and picking up the phone. And we're a new body, and we've got some road left to travel with one another, and the public is expecting a lot from us, and we have a lot of responsibility to deliver and find ways to work together, certainly not against one another. one thing I think that I'd like to share with you is that I agree with the mayor that everybody is entitled to exercise their First Amendment rights in their own individual capacities. What I will commit to all of you, and I don't think we need this as any sort of policy, but I would commit to you that as a general rule, I would not take a position for or against a legislative item that was against the will of the majority of this body. But if I felt so compelled to do so, I would let you all know. And at least that way, that avoids some of the misunderstanding or misinterpretation. I do want to say that I am supportive of special elections. I want to make sure they're workable and practical. And I say this, I mean, for the biggest reason I say it is because in some shape or another, single member districts are here to stay. And it would be a shame to think about a vacancy resulting in an appointment chosen by members of the council representing the rest of the city. I think each of our districts, each of our residency districts, need to have somebody in that seat that is supported by and chosen by the people who reside in the district. I like the other council members, I want to thank Mr. Belote for making a special trip from sunny Florida to come to cold Virginia Beach. I like the solution that he proposed in terms of some bright lines and the third Tuesday, April, or the general election. I guess my question to you, Mr. Mayor, and to the body is where does that leave us in terms of the legislation? The direction on the table is still to actively support that legislation. Are we going to be working with our legislators to help craft some sort of meaningful and practical workaround to the issue we're facing?
Yeah, let me take a bite of this apple. I think, from what I understand through the manager was that they're going to still pursue supporting it up in Richmond. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, yes, unless council tells us otherwise, Deborah's going to continue to advocate in support of it. I think if there's changes that need to be made, Andrew, what's the timeline for that? February 8th?
Yes, February 8th is the first day of crossover. Yes, February 8th is the first day of crossover, so that is the first day that the House will consider only Senate bills and vice versa in the Senate. The Senate will consider only House bills.
Right, but yeah, I think think that right now, due to a number of reasons, some of which we take responsibility for, and other out of our control. Given some of the barriers to success that they have here, it's now in the ball court of the legislators. But then this is not to say that this can be a great tool for us going forward on how to improve things so we get to a better win and improve that communication that we're talking about. That's my thought. Okay? Yes, Sabrina.
Share some comments that I had, and it's certainly going to say this in a way that doesn't make anyone feel attacked or that there's an issue, but I want to get these thoughts out because it speaks to the purpose of this meeting and my feelings about this whole circumstance. So, many folks say that this special session is not necessary, but I submit to you that it's needful, and it's a needful conversation that needed to be had. This discussion was not brought to the majority of this body, so the conversation is brought to you. When I learned about the actions of a few people from the body, I became very disturbed because, you know, we had frank conversations last week regarding transparency, open dialogue, conversation, and we talked a lot about working together. And these actions and the actions in question, they erode that trust. And it erodes the trust of the body, and it nullifies that conversation that we had last week. I learned about this whole ordeal, as I mentioned, citizens who reached out and stated that members called to interfere. And I'm being told that it was a fact that members did call. Members did try to intervene to derail this legislation. This is true. And so the citizens asked that we get involved, that we investigate, and that we find out what was going on. This is not how I would normally have liked to have handled this situation, but unfortunately, the meeting was called to address these concerns. You know, it's important, and I've learned from this whole process, it's important not to interfere with the process. That's important. And the process was attempted to be interfered with. It's a fact. The old process of placing individuals in vacancies on this council was extremely flawed. And speaking as someone who sat through many of those sessions, the rules, the process changed every time. And for some folks, it just made no sense. And so Council Member John Moss stood forward. He brought the legislation forward to change the process so that there could be a change and that people and citizens could elect their own and the specific person of their choice to represent them. That was always the need and cry from the voters. And we've had previous conversations about how, in closed session, about how the system did or did not work. And so today, I think, you know, based on this series of actions that led up to this circumstance, it was important to have the conversation. Nothing wrong with talking and getting information out, and I think that's what we did. However, I do understand this. We must understand that an environment that fosters trust, honesty, transparency must be cultivated by leadership. Otherwise, the path forward will be challenging for us. And those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Anybody else before closing? Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I just feel really compelled, and I don't want to get into a back and forth by any means, but once again, we heard a series of inferences and suggestions without presentation of facts or evidence. I don't know who contacted who, what, when, where, or why. The only thing I've heard of, as Mrs. Henley provided, I think very succinctly, is gossip. Gossip. And gossip that has been proliferated throughout social media and even into this body, that was part of the reason, it appears, precipitated the discussion. And for me, it's very challenging to hear assertions about the need for transparency when, in fact, as I think, the only member of the body who voted for this legislative agenda, besides Councilmember Wooten, who remains on the body, was never contacted. I learned about the special meeting when I received notification about it from the city clerk. And I would think that if we want to talk about, and let's just be honest about it, let's be bold and have the conversation, because I think that was the intent of the retreat. It's very challenging for me to hear about calls for transparency and collaboration when I feel that did not occur in this instance. And, you know, I'm challenged by sort of how I perceive a pattern of sort of being lectured to about a lack of transparency and collaboration when I am not witnessing that behavior in reciprocation. And that's one of the things we need to work. I thought we addressed it at the need for that at the retreat. And if I'm being honest, which I will be here, it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street, and somehow we're missing it. But I don't want the public, I can't sit here silently and let the public receive information that somehow there are improper or nefarious or, you know, cloak and dagger things happening here, because I'm not witnessing that. And the only evidence that I've seen brought to the table that would suggest that is some social media screenshot or gossip from the community without the presentation of fact. And I'm troubled that we're advancing that into the public domain because, yes, it does undermine trust. And we have to work together to serve our community, and we have to talk to each other. And I will tell you, I would have appreciated an opportunity to have participating discussion about the special call for the meeting and what the intent of it would be, and didn't have that opportunity, and I do regret it.
Okay, Chris.
Councilmember Lucci, again, thank you. Thank you for everyone for coming tonight. Sorry to take time out of your weeknight. We're dealing with a new day, and we have a culture here. And I'm listening to, you know, my FC classmate, and I've heard Sabrina when we were getting onboarded, and there's been situations in the past where I've heard the mayor and vice mayor say, you know, we were looking at this and we didn't think it was necessary to call everyone. Talked, you know, why would we invite, you know, Councilman Rouse in? He was, you know, so we're dealing with a culture, Mayor. And I agree to disagree with Councilman Berlucci about the no receipts. Here's the solution: closed session. Patrick, bring in our legislative individual, Mrs. Bryan, who indicated to me on the phone, facts, receipts. She was unwilling, Michael, to embarrass people on council. So Deborah has the receipts. She can tell you exactly who called her. She can tell you if you want in closed session.
Okay, yeah, with due respect, I think we have a situation here where we're discussing an employee that is under the direct direction of the city manager.
Mr. City Manager, if indeed we want to be transparent and move forward and have the confidence and the trust in each other, which we established in the retreat,
Okay.
we can do that.
Okay. Yeah, please.
I don't think that qualifies for closed session.
The evaluation of an employee under the direction of the city manager would not qualify for closed session.
Okay, at this point, you know, if we can, you know, I'd just like to make it, you know, a closing comment. And I tell you what, I truly appreciate the value of what we're doing here. The need for transparency and communication. I have to ask the question. During the retreat, we talked about the process of getting things on the agenda. And one of the things we talk about, if you wanted to have a special meeting, talk to me first. And I would have approved this. And I didn't find out about this until the city manager texted me on Saturday. Okay? I would have gladly approved this, and I would gladly have sent an email out to everybody. So bottom line is, as we seek to improve the process, okay, perceptions are reality with everybody. Let's all try to do what we agreed to, and I think things will go a little better. Okay, at this point, we're done. Thank you.